Then we can think, may this talk, discussions, and contemplations become cause and conditions to inspire us to practice and to cultivate the practice of six perfections within our mind stream. So that we can be more beneficial to others and may it become cause and conditions to achieve fully awakened state, so that we can be not only beneficial, but the greatest help and benefit to not only others, but each and every sentient being in the most skillful way, with the highest level of wisdom and compassion. Okay. So maybe we can do maybe I can recite the refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. Sangye chodang zoge sonam la chanju patu dane gyatsu che dagi choche gibe sonam ke dola penje sangye tuba sangye chodang zoge sonam la chanju patu dane gyatsu dagi choche gibe sonam ke dola penje sangye tuba sangye chodang zoge sonam la chanju patu dane dagi choche gibe sonam ke dola penje sangye tuba. So as we discussed last week, overview of the six perfections and how the practice of six perfections is the very heart of the Bodhisattva's practice. And today and next week and coming week, we will discuss about the first two perfection, the perfection of generosity and moral discipline, and starting with today with the practice of the first practice among the six perfections or 10 perfections. The first one, the perfection of generosity. And we, and we are going to discuss the generosity of body, mind, speech, and mind, because sometimes generosity can be misunderstood in a way that we might think generosity is limiting in a way that it has to be physical generosity or physical or body. And so the practice of generosity is much more profound and greater than that. So that is, I think, why we are going to kind of discuss from that point of view. So as I mentioned last week, the practice of generosity will support, as a foundations for the other further practice, such as the perfection of moral discipline, patience, and so forth. We discussed a little bit before. So it's related with other practice, how this practice help and support for the better practice of other perfections when we have the foundation of this practice. And that is why also this practice is given first by the Buddha among the six perfections. As much as the bodhicitta and the wisdom is so important, the two wings of the, the two wings to fly over the ocean of samsara to the shore of the fully enlightenment, the wing of the wisdom and the bodhicitta. But in order to develop the realizations of the wisdom and bodhicitta, we need a lot of support of lot of merit of the virtues. It needs to be supported by many other conditions. One of the conditions is the support of the merit. And through the practice of generosity, it helped to create the merit, the virtues. And through that, by having created enough virtues of the merit, then it becomes more easier to cultivate the bodhicitta and the wisdom when we actually meditate on them, when we actually contemplate and meditate and practice on them. So again, that is why wisdom is actually kept later on the sixth, much later, even though the wisdom is the key to cut the very root of all the delusions. But in order to have that wisdom, the realization of that wisdom, we need lot of support of the merit, and through the practice of generosity that can help us by creating enough supportive conditions, the virtues, the merit of the virtues that can then make easier for us to cultivate the bodhicitta and wisdom as we engage in our practice to develop them. Of course, there is a generosity of body, speech, and mind. Among them, the most important is the generosity of the mind. The generosity of the speech and body come through the generosity of the mind. The generosity of mind is the thought to give, the thought to share, the thought to give, and the thought to share with others. And from that thought of the willingness to share and to give, then you are able to share, you are able to give through speech and body, physical positions, wealth, and so forth. So that, of course, we will go more detail on that. So generosity can be just a mental state without any attachment, the thought to give, the thought to share. That itself is a generosity. When you have that sincerity, when you have sincerity, genuine feeling or wanting to give, wanting to share with something, with someone, that thought itself is the generosity. Then not only you have that thought, out of that thought, then maybe you are willing to share, such as, your knowledge, through your speech, by explaining, and teachings, or by sharing your knowledge, your wisdom. And not only the speech, not only you are able to share through the speech, your knowledge, your wisdom, whatever you can share, then, that you are able to, on top of that, then you are able to also, when they are in the needs of, for those who are hunger, who have suffering of hunger. Okay. And so today, of course, we are going to, so again, so it doesn't always have to be physical or verbal speech, but actually the most important, that state of mind. And so therefore, the practice of generosity is not restrained by lack of wealth. Do you get it? Your practice of generosity cannot be restrained by lack of wealth. You can perfect the practice of generosity even if you don't have any wealth. And that is where Buddha himself, he didn't have much, he didn't have anything, actually. Of course, at the very beginning of his life, he was a crown prince who had so much, everything. He left that life and dedicated his life into in a different lifestyle, and engaged in the practice, meditation, achieved the enlightenment, and then he didn't possess anything except his basic rope and the bowl. Even day-to-day food he was begging with with the rest of his followers. So he doesn't have any physical wealth to give to others, but still he perfected the practice of generosity. How can he practice the practice of generosity if he hasn't any wealth to give and share? And that through by perfecting and completing the thought, the wish to give without any kind of hesitation, without any attachment, without any holding, and being able to perfect that state of mind. That is how he perfected generosity. Of course, in the previous life as a bodhisattva, of course, he practiced generosity or giving, even wealth, his even life and like that in many of his lifetime. But at the last stages of his enlightenment, he didn't have that wealth, but still he perfected through that. And even someone like, let's say, another great example, Milarepa, one of the great enlightened beings in Tibet. He had nothing, He didn't own anything. Even the robes he was wearing was worn out, But still he perfected the six perfections. Still he perfected the practice of six perfections. So how he perfected the practice of generosity if he doesn't have wealth? Because he perfected the thought, the wish, the thought, his mind to give without any hesitation. So if he have anything, he will have no hesitation to share and give when there is opportunity to do that. So I think, therefore Shantideva, as he said in Guides to Bodhisattva Way of Life, the perfection of the generosity doesn't depend on solving all the problems of poverty. In order to perfect your practice of generosity, that doesn't mean that there is no more poverty in the world. Buddha came, he perfected the sixth perfection, the perfection of generosity. Still there's poverty still in the world now. But then how did he perfect that? Because of his state of mind, that the wish to give. So if Buddha have anything, he didn't have physical, in terms of physical wealth, he didn't have. But if he have something, he will have no hesitation to give and share it, because he had perfected that thought, that wish. So I think from that state of mind, then engage in the practice. So in the classical teachings, whether it's all the great Indian masters writing, as well as all the Tibetan masters' writings, such as Lamrim, they break the generosity in four or three categories: the generosity of the wealth, the generosity of the body or your life, and the generosity of virtues, the root of the virtues. And then when we classify in the four, then on top of that, the generosity of love, or sometimes it is called generosity of fearlessness. Basically, whether you say it's a generosity of fearlessness or generosity of love, is about giving protections for those sentient beings that are in the harms, such as liberating them, giving their new life, liberating from being slaughtered, for example, or protecting them from being drawn in the water. You can see sometimes bugs, that might be they fall into the water and they're almost struggling to kind of fly because they are almost drowning, dying, and to be able to protect them is giving out of love, compassion, giving them the life, saving their life, giving them protections, and thereby giving them fearless. When they are drowning, there's a lot of fear of dying, like us. So when you keep them then they are free from that fear. So that is more classical kind of divisions that you find in many of those teachings. And today, we decided to put it slightly different, the generosity of body, speech, and mind, and I guess there's no contradictions. Okay, so within the practice of generosity of body, we can include, of course, our own body, the generosity of our own body, our own life, as well as the generosity of materials, possessions, and so can conclude in those two. We can include those two in that generosity. So when we practice the generosity, there can be two different approaches to that. Okay, one from the practice of practicing generosity for individual liberations. Okay, that is not part of the Bodhisattva's practice of perfections of generosity. And then there is practice of generosity, the perfections of generosity from the Bodhisattva's point of view or the path. So when we practice from the point of view of individual liberations, as I mentioned before, the motivation is to achieve liberations, and in order to achieve the liberations from the samsara, from all the delusions, all the obscuration of delusions, then we need to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness in order to cultivate, in order to have the realization of wisdom realizing emptiness. Then we need a lot of support of virtues and merit, and therefore generosity support that. So that is one of the reasons, motivation to do that practice. Also, in order to achieve liberations, some of us might not be able to achieve liberation in one lifetime, even though it would be great if we can achieve in one lifetime. We all inspire or have the best to do them, but the fact and the reality It's not everyone will be able to achieve in one lifetime. It could take many lifetimes. And that means that we continue to practice in many lifetimes. In order to practice Dharma, we need the right condition to be able to practice Dharma in many lifetimes. And having enough wealth to support our practice is one of the conditions. If we don't have enough condition to support, then we will be struggling all whole life trying to just make enough to survive. So then we cannot find a time to practice the Dharma because there is no supporting condition to practice. And so therefore, to engage in a practice of generosity, so we can continue to have wealth in all future lives, so then we don't have to struggle all the time to get a wealth, so that we can have a condition to practice the Dharma. So therefore, as Nagarjuna says, in his precious garland, Jinbe Longzhu Tingde, the benefit or the result of practice of generosity is that you will have a lot of wealth in the futures. Okay, and the reason to have a wealth in the futures from that perspective is, one, to support the condition for the in many lifetimes, so that we don't have to struggle to find enough to support ourselves, so that we can practice the Dharma, so that we don't have to struggle that. So because we have enough, financial support or wealth to support us in our practice. So that is one. And secondly, as a merit, virtues of merit, or the merit of virtues to develop all the realizations, especially the wisdom. So that, But of course, from both sides of a point of view, when you are trying to practice the both sides of path, from the both sides of point of view, or from the both sides of a practice point of view, you practice generosity because there is someone who is in need of help, and you have the condition to help and to reduce the pain and suffering of that person. Because through your practice of giving or generosity or sharing, because you can reduce, whether it's individual, whether it's collective, sentient beings, suffering and pain. You can reduce, you can overcome, release from that suffering. And so the main motivations is to help, to reduce the suffering of others. And so therefore, we shouldn't have any kind of, when we are trying to engage the practice of generosity from the Bodhisattva point of view, or from the Bodhisattva path point of view, when you are trying to engage in the practice of perfection generosity, the motivation is not to achieve, even the liberation. The motivation is not to even have the right condition in the futures for ourselves, but the motivation is to help and benefit the others. So the motivation should be coming from true love, compassion, and bodhicitta, if possible, to help and benefit others. That is that. That motivation is important when we're trying to engage in perfection of the generosity. And when that kind of practice, when we engage in the generosity or giving or share, with that intention and motivations, with the pure intentions and motivation of love, compassion, bodhicitta, solely to help and benefit others, solely to help and benefit others, solely to reduce and release from their pain and suffering, then, as Buddha said, when you form the intention to help, there's great joy. When you have the intentions out of that loving kindness, compassion, both to the mind, the intention to release or reduce the pain of suffering, you have great joy because the intention to give, to practice generosity, come from state of love, compassion, and that gives you a lot of joy just to form that intention. And then when you're actually able to give, not only that, when you are actually able to give, and then when you see the suffering of others being reduced or released, there is even more joy. You very much wanted to help to reduce and release the suffering of that person, and now you are able to do that, and you can see that their suffering has been released or their suffering has been reduced to a certain level, and you have been able to support and help. There's immense great joy and satisfactions. And that joy and satisfaction doesn't come because you want, it just comes naturally. That's just naturally. And then at the end, when you reflect on that, that you have been able to contribute, that you have been able to help, that you have been able to help to reduce a little bit of the problems, little bit of the sufferings, that you have been able to do something, then it gives you immense joy and satisfaction. So there is a joy at the beginning, before the practice, when you inform the intention. There's a joy when you actually engage in the practice itself of giving. And there is a great joy at the end of that when you reflect and when you see that pain, suffering has been reduced a little bit with whatever level, and then you have been able to contribute or help in little way that you can through your practice generosity. It gives you so much sense of meaning, satisfactions, joyfulness. And so therefore, and that is meaning when you see in the Buddha's teaching, when he says, there is a joy in the when you form the intention, there is a joy when you give, there is a joy at the end. When that practice of generosity coming from the intention of love, compassion, then there is that. And of course, when we practice the generosity, we don't practice to feel that kind of satisfactions or to feel that joyfulness. If you are practicing that to feel joyfulness, to feel satisfaction, then that doesn't become sincere practice coming from true love and compassion. But we do with truly with love and compassion to reduce the pain or suffering of someone, that there is a opportunity and we have the potential to do that, and where we are able to do that with that pure intention. And then naturally that kind of joyfulness, satisfaction come, and you don't have to feel guilt about that. You don't have to feel guilt about that to have that kind of joyfulness, that feeling of satisfaction, being able, that is not something you strive to get that, but it just comes naturally. It's just like when you have true love, compassion, peacefulness, joyfulness just come. It's a manifestation of that. And therefore, when generosity is practiced from the mind, the state of mind, from love and compassion, then it's the best external expression of love and compassion. As His Holiness always says, generosity is the outward, natural expressions of love and compassion. true generosity. Okay, true generosity is a natural outward expressions of true inner attitude of love and compassion. And so that is the bodhisattva's practice of generosity. You know. Mm. So when we talk of the generosity of positions or wealth, it's not just material, physical wealth. Of course, definitely, if we have resource, uh, wealth, positions, we have the resource and we have the opportunity to be able to help through by practice of our giving and generosity to reduce the suffering and pain of the sentient beings, many sentient beings, if possible, even not many sentient beings, at least few, not few, at least one sentient beings, and we'll try to do that as much as possible. As I think there was something I saw where Mother Teresa says, if you can feed 1,000, that's great. If you cannot feed 1,000, try to feed 100. If you cannot feed 100, try to feed 10. If you cannot feed 10, at least try to feed one. Feed one person. Similarly, that the idea is if we can reduce the suffering of countless sentient beings, all sentient beings, that's great. If we can't at this point, then at least how much ever we can um, by supporting individually or organizations that supports to reduce whether it's a physical pain or the emotional mental pains. Like most of the Dharma centers is to help to reduce the suffering mainly of emotional mental sufferings that we all experience. Rich and poor, everyone experience some certain level of emotional and mental suffering and pain. And Dharma centers help to provide the tools to deal with those, reducing those emotional mental suffering to a certain degree. And so supporting a Dharma center is also, even though we might not be supporting directly to reduce, in terms of the physical suffering itself, but definitely, emotional mental suffering. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. So anyway, so trying to practice the generous giving to help and benefit as many as possible, but if not many, at least how much ever we can. So as I mentioned, the in terms of the generosity of the wealth and positions, in terms of providing support and help to the Dharma center, providing and help for those who are suffering, the suffering of hunger, thirsty, the suffering of cold and hot, not having enough to protect themselves, whether it's clothes, whether it's shelter, so providing, helping them to have better warm clothes or to keep them protected or to have a shelter to protect them from the elements and so forth, mm, and helping to, to liberate, yeah, okay. Mm. And providing, supporting for educations, those who are educated, who have less opportunity to educate, unable to have better education because lack of financial help, like many children around the world, they don't have access to the educations. And due to lack of educations, they cannot find a good job to support their families themselves, and they cannot compete with others, and the only job they can get is most, difficult, less paying, and a lot of time being exploited by others, and many of them due to lack of educations, so supporting someone to have educations, and maybe hopefully, by supporting one children to be educated, maybe that children with good education, maybe they might be able to support the whole families and coming generations. And who knows, they might be able to support not only their families, go beyond the families to help the community, the village itself, the community itself, the country itself, the world itself. They have the potential. So supporting for, someone's education, supporting for someone, medical medical needs, again, many part of the world, you just pray and hope that you don't get sick. Because if you get sick, there's no treatment for them. They don't have the money to get to treatment. That was how it is. It's still in many parts of the world, including Nepal, India, and of course, many parts of the other countries, Africa and many parts, you just pray and hope that you don't get sick. Sometimes you have to make decisions whether to sell everything, your home, your house, your land, to for the treatment, or you keep it for your family. And in certain those difficult situations, in some family, they make decisions. They will not get the treatments because they cannot afford it. Because in order to afford it, they have to sell their land, their house, and that means their family will be left with nothing, will be homeless, nothing. So they will decide to forego the treatments, even there is treatment for their situations, because they wanted to protect their families from their families becoming homeless, from their families losing a small farm they have to support their living. And such is the situation in the world, many parts of the world. And so again, when we have the enough resource and when we have the opportunity, and to help those who are in it, even it is a small contributions, even though we might not be able to support whole treatment, but to be able to give a little bit, as it says, drop of water in the oceans, many drop of water from many peoples that can help, so these are part of the generosity. There are so many different ways that we can practice generosity with our wealth, with our positions, to reduce the suffering of other sentient beings in the world to a certain degree. Sometimes we might feel, it's too overwhelming, I can help one person, but what about the rest of the world who need equally help? And, and so by helping one person, I cannot make a big change. Situation, I could not change the situation, the world itself. Well, by helping one person, if I can help one person, one of my friends help another person, and another person help, that's how we can solve the problem. Not one person can solve the whole problem, but if each of us help one person, 100% help one person, is we have reduced the suffering of 100 people. If 1,000 people try to help one person each, then the suffering of 1,000 is solved. And so in this world, probably 3 billions of people have the condition to support another 3 billion people who doesn't have that kind of And if everyone's help one person, each of them, those 3 billion people, we have reduced the suffering of 3 or 4 billions of other suffering. In a way, then we reduce the pain and suffering of the so many of this world. And so we should think, even though I cannot solve the whole problem, but at least I can reduce someone's suffering and pain. Therefore, I can at least, and so that is how we try to think. And hopefully, as our mind get more courageous, maybe I think, maybe I could support 2%. And then slowly with practice, we get familiar with that. We become more compassionate, more courageous. Maybe we think, yeah, you know that I think I can afford, without giving my own comfort, I can help 3 people or 5 people or 10 people, And at the moment, a lot of time is we have not been able to practice enough generosity because there's a lot of fear. We don't have the courage, lot of fear, If I share that, what will happen to me in the future? What happens if I get sick? What happens, I need this and that. And so we all have this all kind of fear. So even though we have enough to share, we still feel we don't have enough, driven by that fear. And that is where, one of the verses that from Shantideva's Guided Books of Way of Life, where he says, thinking that what will be left for me if I give to someone is an attitude of non-bodhisattva. Whereas when you feel, if I enjoy this myself, what will be there left to share with others? That is the attitude of the divine or bodhisattvas. So the practice of generosity doesn't come from how much you have. It comes through how big your heart is. How big your heart is. How compassionate you are. If you see all around the world, there are people who are who have the least, but who are most generous. And then there are people who have most, who are less generous. You often go to a lot of villages in those every part of the world. People who live very simple life, who have very little, but you find all over the world who are extremely generous. Extremely generous. And then, you go in a certain part of the world, in those developed countries, so many people have so much, 3 houses, 4 houses, many cars, most expensive cars, all of that. But, some of them struggle to be generous enough. Some of them struggle to be generous enough. So it is not about how much we have. Sometimes we feel, if I can have a little bit more, I can be more generous. That is not true. Do you get it? We always feel I can be more generous if I could have more. And then you have a little bit more, then you have same feeling. I could be more generous if I could have a little bit more. I could be generous if I could have 100,000. And once you have 100,000, you think I could be a little bit more generous. I can't be generous now. 100,000 is not enough. When I think of my future and all of that, If I could have, 10,000, maybe I could be a little bit more generous. When you have that 10,000, you feel same way. 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, it never, until we train our mind. When we train our mind, even if you have the last meal, you will want to share it. You will have want to share it. I was very touched. I when 5 6 years ago, when there was a earthquake in Nepal, and there was one BBC reporter, who was reporting from that area. I guess in one of the village where all the people in many houses have collapsed and people have lost everything, and and they were digging their house to find some grains from there where they have in the house they have some grain, and so the house collapsed and so they don't have access, so they are digging the house to find those grains so they can actually feed their families, and then this one old lady was actually saying to the reporter, to come and join their lunch, little bit of grain she had found left from her house, collapsed house. She was willing to share, even though she could think, if it is like myself, I would think, if I give this one, what will happen tomorrow? Me, my family for tomorrow. What will I? What? How am I going to feed my family or myself tomorrow, next week, next month? But she wanted to give. That is the heart of generosity. That is the heart of generosity. And you see that kind of story all over the world, I was listening to one interview with one of the quite famous kind of Nepali folk artists, but he was very famous folk artist, musicians, but he lived very simple life himself. So he used to visit the villages, and he was sharing many stories, and one places he went in one village, one traveling, and he asked for a place to stay, one families. They had only one bed, poor bed. And of course, they don't recognize him, in the villages, they don't have access to internet also, even though he's famous in the cities, but in the villages, they don't know him, But he asked if he's traveling through and if he could have a place to stay, and they gave. And he said, the family, they have the wife, husband, and child. They gave his bed to him and they slept by the door. Stranger, they didn't know him. He's just a stranger passing through, asked for a place to spend the night, and they offer him their bed because they had only one bed, and they slept by the door. These are, these are the true, big heart and generosity that you find all over the world, And so, it would be hard for us if someone stranger asks us to give a place to stay, but forget about giving our bed and we sleeping on the ground by the door and giving them, but even just to give a space, but that kind of comes through a big heart, love, compassion, concern, because they are concerned it is a stranger passing through who need, and so the big heart, and so this is something, yeah, I think, is mm, And to be able to practice generosity to support, whether it's institutions, or organizations or individuals, we don't have to be rich. We don't have to be rich. And also one of the things I also saw personally, my observation, my impression, my observation also is, also whenever I go to the different Dharma centers all over the world, most of the time it's the people who have less who are supporting the centers, who are generous to support the center. And I feel that is really good. I feel really good. It's not always, some members I see in some certain center, they are quite rich people as well, but they don't necessarily support as much. On the other hand, who are people who are normal working people, some of them maybe even not so, even they have some struggles in their life to pay the bills, everyday bills, but who support the centers, Or like I've heard many stories where, certain individuals supporting education of children in Africa or Asia, some of the poor countries, by reducing their coffee, 3 coffee, if they are drinking 7 coffees a week, they reduce 3 coffee and save the money from 3 coffee to support someone's education or something like that. They don't have to give up all their comfort, but just by reducing a little bit of their small things and to be able to support. And these are very inspiring. When you hear those kind of stories and you hear that, it's very, very inspiring how someone can be such a generous, by willing to give a little bit of their comfort. It's not going to make their life miserable, but just giving a little bit of comfort. I don't know even is the really comfort or not, but little bit of comfort in order to support and reduce someone's or a family's suffering and pain. And if we can have that kind of attitude, even the half population of the world, or even the half population of developing countries, people who can, then I think we can definitely solve a lot of the reduce many of the sufferings, especially physical sufferings, due to lack of educations, due to lack of health, due to lack of food, and so forth. So that is I guess that is maybe I have to my alarm saying keep quiet. So I think for today maybe we will kind of stop here for the talk, and then we will have 5-minute breaks, and when we come from 5-minute break, maybe we'll take a little bit of time to reflect, contemplate of some of the things that we just kind of discuss, and then at the end we will have a question and answer. Okay. Okay, so we'll have we'll have 5-minute break. So if you need to go to bathroom, have something to grab, something to drink, something, stretch your body, whatever. Okay, see you then. Thank you. So if everyone is back, then maybe we take a few moments to reflect, contemplate on some of the things that we discuss. So again, try to make yourself as comfortable as possible. Then try to bring your attention to the breath, watching it mindfully as you breathe in and out. Then we can think, may our contemplations that we are trying to contemplate, meditate, become cause and condition to inspire and practice the generosity, as well as all other five perfections, the practice of all five perfections. In order to reduce the suffering of all sentient beings. And may it also be cause and condition to obtain fully enlightened state, so we can be greatest benefit to all sentient beings. Then we can think, of someone you really love and care very dearly. You can bring that person's visualize, imagine in front of you, who is most dear to you, whom you have a lot of love, compassion, sense of care, dear closeness. Then think of, something that they need it, but they don't. They really want and they really need it. More than want something, they really need it. That could make much difference in their life, in that moment, in that time. But they don't have that thing or that material position, whatever. And due to that, how much pain and suffering they might be going through. And think and imagine that you have the resource to reduce that pain. And generating the wish. You have the resource and opportunity, and therefore you have this intention, the wish to provide the support and help to reduce their pain and suffering. How happy and how joyful that you feel when you find out that you have the resource and opportunity to reduce the pain and suffering, and the intention to do that. Feeling of relief Then you can imagine actually reducing and releasing from that problem and suffering by being able to provide that resource. And that person's suffering or problem has been released or reduced to a certain level. And to see the smile, the joy, the happiness in that person. How much joy it gives to you to see that. Try to feel that joyfulness, that satisfaction to be able to help to reduce the suffering. Feeling of meaningful in our life to be able to support, to reduce the pain. Then imagine and think, later when we reflect and contemplate on that at one time when they really needed help, support, where we have the resource and opportunity and we are able to provide and help. When we reflect on that, so much joy and happiness that we have been able to support them, help them when they are in needs and difficult. Try to feel the joyfulness, the meaningfulness, satisfaction to be able to do that. So then you can think in our life, in the past, when we had the resource and opportunity to help, and when we had the thought to help someone, the feeling of joyfulness that we had. And the feeling of so much joy when we were actually able to help and actually able to reduce their problem and suffering to a certain degree at that time. And now when we look back, in our life, how much meaningful, joyful satisfaction we feel that we have been able to help support them those times, in those difficult times. And imagine when we didn't, in those times, even we have the resource and opportunity to help, if we have not helped, those resource and opportunity will have been gone, but we haven't help someone to reduce their pain and suffering. Neither it has make much difference in our life by not being able to share, by not being able to give. That hasn't made our life much better. But if you have been able to share and give, definitely now when you reflect, it makes much more, bring a lot more happiness, joy, meaningful in our life. Just for a small example, if we have been able to help someone support their education or any Dharma center or anything, monthly 40, 50s, but supporting that or hundreds, how much difference it makes for the organization, institution to continue to run and support so many beings, or individual whose life has changed because they have better opportunity for their educations. On the other hand, if we have not used that resource to help any organization, institution, individual, how much difference it will make in our life to make our life more better, more comfortable, more happier. $40, $50, $100 in a month, extra that, how much it make difference in our life. It doesn't make so much difference. But when we use that to practice generosity, it makes so much difference, whether it's individual, whether it's organization. So much difference. So with that understanding, we make a strong determinations to be able to work with our mind to be more big heart, less fearful, more courageous. And to be able to go a little bit extra further to practice little bit more generosity in our life. Then we dedicate all the virtues that we have accomplished or created through the contemplations May it be cause and condition to cultivate to bodhicitta mind within the mind stream of oneself, all sentient beings. May it be cause and conditions to perfect and complete the practice of six perfections. And to achieve two kayas. Then we can slowly again bring back our attentions to the breath. You can slowly open. So now I think I will open for any questions, comments. If you have any questions, please feel, to share it.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Geshe.
Yes, please.
Geshe, you mentioned that we're meant to give without thinking of anything in return, or something like that. But are we also meant to think of enlightenment? Because I came across a teacher who said that we have to give or help or do a merit, and then it has to be dedicated. It has to be for enlightenment in order for it to be counted as bodhicitta. Is what, or are we still meant to not? Are we still meant to do it and not expect anything?
The best is not to have any expectations. So the expectations to have a wealth in this life, expectation to have a wealth in the future life.
Oh, sorry. What about?
Yeah, and
only for enlightenment.
Yes.
Only for enlightenment, like the wish for that
to achieve enlightenment. Yeah. If the to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that is bodhicitta mind. That is bodhicitta motivation. Then that is okay. Okay. Generally speaking, is better. It is definitely is the motivation is to achieve enlightenment in order to be benefit to all sentient beings. So definitely that comes through love and compassion, wanting to be help, benefit to others, reduce the suffering, release from the suffering, and therefore to achieve enlightenment, therefore to create merit to the practice of generosity. But if possible, if you bring the wisdom to that, then even the enlightenment is empty of inherent existence. Even the path that lead to enlightenment, the practice of generosity or sixth perfection itself, is empty of inherent existence. Even the I, who is practicing the generosity, empty of inherent existence. If you bring that wisdom, then you don't even have, then you don't even have any kind of grasping to the enlightenment, the result. So then that practice becomes even more stronger and better. To bring both relative bodhicitta and wisdom together, then that would be great. Even more better, even more stronger. But of course, even without the wisdom, definitely to have the bodhicitta mind, relative bodhicitta intentions or motivation, that is wonderful, because that is to benefit others. So it is not selfish attitude for self individual liberation or self individual comfort. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one more, sorry.
Yes, please.
Geshe, how does all the Bodhisattva and Buddhas help and give so much without feeling tired? How do they always give and help without feeling tired?
Without feeling?
Tired?
Going?
Tired? Like,
Tired.
where do they get all the energy from? Like, how do they keep doing it 24/7?
Yeah. Well, you know, I have a pill that they order from me. So if you take that pill, you know, 24/7, you don't get tired. So if you want to order that pill, you can order. I'm joking, you know. Well, they get the energy from the bodhicitta and wisdom. They get the energy from the bodhicitta and the wisdom, and so therefore they are tireless. One small example I can give is nothing. Parents, especially mothers and parents, love for the child. Okay, for the child is inwardly is most unconditional love, especially when the child are very young, and the parents, especially mothers, love is most unconditional in a worldly sense. Still, there is some, from the spiritual point of view, still there's a little bit of condition, but in worldly, it is most unconditional. And when they have that, the parent can work tirelessly for a child. They might get up in the middle of night 7 times. You know, they have, you know, the child cry in the middle of night. They have to feed it. They have to change diapers, all kind of things. And they do that for many, many years. Every day, weeks, months, at least 3-4 years. And so where does that come from? Because of that, their unconditional love for the child. You know, for example, now if their co-worker, you know, keep on waking them up 6 times, 7 times a week during the nighttime, by tomorrow they will not have the energy. They will be very tired. I couldn't sleep well yesterday. You know, I got up 7 times in the middle of night. You feel very tired because you didn't have good sleep. You couldn't sleep well, and you feel very tired, physically, mentally, physically, and because you don't have that same level of unconditional love for that you had for the child, and that makes a difference where parent can deal with have that energy during those times to all the so much effort they put and so much extra that they need to do, take care of alert and all of that, and they are able to do that. They will not be able to do with other people, but they are able to do that because of that the unconditional love for the child. And so the bodhisattvas, bodhicitta is much more unconditional than that love, much more stronger, and therefore, you know, they have more energy without being tired. And then when you have wisdom relies on emptiness directly, then definitely that add up even more energy and without being so tired. So that is where it come from, you know, the bodhisattvas. Their energy come from the bodhicitta realizations, and the wisdom realizing emptiness directly from that realizations. Okay. I think I saw some in the chat some caution, but I cannot see here. I don't know where.
Sure.
So Sandra, someone might have to read for me.
Yeah. Or Sandra, do you want to unmute and ask Geshe? Yeah.
Okay. Geshe,
Yes, please.
If there's a situation where someone has harmed us in some way, maybe by lying to us or caused us discomfort financially, is it generosity of mind then to offer victory to them?
I couldn't hear clearly. Can you?
Okay. I'll send it again. See if it comes through.
I can read it in the chat for you, Geshe.
Yeah, you can read. Maybe whenever Lindy can read it, I can hear her sound better.
Okay, so Geshe, Sandra's asking if there is a situation where someone has harmed us in some way, maybe by lying to us or caused us discomfort financially, is generosity of mind then to offer victory to them?
It's the generosity, the mind offering victory to them.
So it's a generosity of mind then to offer victory.
Well, I think when that could be similar situation. Let's say someone steal your things, okay? Of course, it can be stolen, it can be cheated, whatever. So when something that happens, instead of having a anger and grudges or resentment, all that, you just kind of dedicate for them. You just mentally dedicate to them. May it be most beneficial, helpful to them, whatever. And by being able to dedicate, you just kind of mentally let it go and give to them. And when you do that, then that becomes the generosity. And also it creates less negative karma for them because you have dedicated to them from your heart. And because you have dedicated from your heart to them, so they create less negative karma. And from our side, we don't hold on, feeling they have cheated us or they have taken advantage of us or they have stolen from us, and all these bad feelings and unhealthy feeling. We can let it go so that we find more peace in ourselves. But letting go of that and wishing them, giving from your mind, giving them, so please, you have it. Please enjoy it. Hopefully that will may it be able to reduce your suffering, may it able to release your sufferings, may it be most beneficial to you, and by being able to dedicate in that way, then it becomes generosity. Because you give mentally, you dedicate to them, mentally you give to them. So I can take one last question if there is. If not, then we do the dedications. Okay. So we take a few moments to dedicate all our virtues and merit, having come together here with intention and listening and discussions and reflecting. May the practice of 6 perfections be fully developed and realized within the mind stream of all sentient beings, including oneself. And may all those who have already actualized to Bodhisattva mind, who have not actualized, may they be able to actualize. Those who have already actualized, not to diminish, but increase more and more. And may all sentient beings be able to achieve fully enlightenment as soon as possible for the benefit of all sentient beings. And may His Holy Lama Sovarimpoche, all the enlightened beings, gurus, have long, healthy life, all their noble wishes be fulfilled. May we always please them by engaging in our practice. And may we be under the care and guidance of them in all this time, in part or in future life, until enlightenment. Yawadi Nudu the Lama Sangye Dugyone, Doa Chikamale, Sala Peba, Chanju Semjo Remboche, Maye Pano Keg, Gawa Nyamba Meba, Konle Kondo Pewa, Pare Rave Pore Shingam, Pendan Dewa Mole, 接着生活真正叫做小白时代报道等有都是彰显相关的增长白公司，就算各位的，就算各位的，老说对这关都小Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe from Anibu to
Thank you.
Anibu says hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you, Geshe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Geshe. Thank you. Thanks, Venerable
Bye.
Lindy.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.